We have shown in our series so far the full extent of the falsehoods, the mendacities, the hate-mongering, and war-mongering that fill the chapters of Muhammad's Quran. To understand the reasons for all of the above characteristics, we must understand Muhammad's background, which would explain his psychological profile.
You are correct, of course, since to fully understand Muhammad, his sayings and his deeds, one must study his formative life and his experiences as he grew up. Everything he did in his life depended entirely upon his upbringing and the influences of the people who took care of him as he matured. Mohammedans tell us all kinds of myths and fairy tales about the childhood of their religious founder Muhammad. The reality is that these are no better than make-believe stories and fables old women tell their grandchildren. Unfortunately, these stories have been adopted into the mainstream of Muhammadan Islam as irrefutable fact. Abd al-Muttalib was Muhammad's grandfather from the Quraysh tribe in Mecca. He traded with Syria and the Yemen and had obtained certain profitable privileges at the pagan shrine of Mecca. It was he who supplied the pilgrims with food and water. He had a number of wives from different tribes who gave him 10 sons, Muhammad's father and uncles, as well as 6 daughters. One of these children was Abdullah. His father, no doubt seeking an alliance with the clan of Banu Zuhra, asked for the young Amina bint Wahb as a bride for his son. Muhammad was the first and only child of this marriage. Muhammad's father Abdullah died either during his wife's pregnancy or shortly thereafter. He left his wife very little, only 1 slave, 5 camels and a few sheep. Amina gave her son to a suckling woman called Halima. Amina died later when Muhammad was only 6 years old. Islamic myths about Muhammad. Nothing is known for certain about Muhammad's childhood. The void was gradually filled with legends that grew ever more beautiful and edifying with the passage of time. Even the earliest and most moderate accounts must be treated with great caution and suspicion. When Muhammadan Islam became the religion of a powerful empire, precepts were needed to regulate social life. Divergent opinions and interests naturally existed. Political parties also grew up, centered around Muhammad's family and companions. In addition, a great many people, impelled by curiosity, piety, or even historical interest, demanded information about Muhammad's life. Men began to appear who were professional repositories of traditions, actually inventors of stories. They would spread a tale to satisfy this curiosity or that piety, or to provide a ruling as occasion demanded. For Muhammad's deeds and sayings had an exemplary value. Like the modern historians, the keepers of tradition were expected to quote their sources. But these were oral ones. Such a story came from such a one, who in turn heard it from another, and so on all the way back to one of Muhammad's contemporaries who had seen him or had heard him say it. It was, of course, a very simple matter to make up false traditions, the Arabic word hadith meaning narratives, to support one's own party or opinion. The Muhammadan records show that the great Arab historians and jurists knew this perfectly well. They tried to do away with the false traditions, those, for example, where the chain of authority cited was manifestly impossible. But they made no claims to any degree of certainty. Instead, they were content to repeat contradictory traditions on the same subject, one after the other, quoting their sources for each. It was up to the reader to decide which one he liked to believe. But Allah knows best, they would often add. The oldest collections of historical traditions available to us date from about 125 years after Muhammad's death. Much imagination had gone to work in the meantime, and yet many facts can be established. As the parties who differ most widely are agreed on the main events of Muhammad's life. Unfortunately, there are many points on which we are very far from certain. In particular, it is clear that extremely little was known about the early years of Muhammad's life, and that much has been made up about it. According to the Qurayshites' custom, the young Muhammad had a nurse from a nomadic clan. In this way, it was thought the children of the Quraysh would be filled with the pure air of the desert and grow strong. Muhammad's mother died when he was 6 years old. His grandfather, the venerable Abd al-Muttalib, who was then 80 years old, took him to live with him, but he died 2 years later. Muhammad was then taken by one of his uncles, Abu Talib. He was a merchant in comfortable circumstances and is said to have been the person who took over the leadership of the Hashim clan. Muhammad seems to have remained a bachelor for longer than was usual among his people. This is virtually all we know about the childhood and young manhood of Muhammad, at least from the earliest sources before the proliferation of legends and myths of all kinds grew out of all reasonable control. No matter what the facts of his upbringing are, what we have on hand is more than enough to build a realistic picture of Muhammad's childhood and upbringing. It is clear that from the very beginning he did not have an auspicious start to life. Muhammad was totally deprived of any parental love and affection, as well as the security and warmth of belonging. Neither his soul nor his body were properly nourished. He was not necessarily attended to when he cried. He did not get picked up, hugged, cuddled, and sweet loving words whispered in his ears. He did not have a father figure to love him, guide him, play with him, and make him feel protected and secure. He did not have the love and warmth of his mother's body and sense of belonging that every child needs. It is impossible for a surrogate mother, a grandfather, or an uncle to show as much love, affection, understanding, and comprehension of a child as a father and mother. Any child growing under these desolate spiritual and physical deprivations cannot and will not mature into a humane and normal human being. Muhammad ended up as a spiritually empty vessel with no understanding of love, compassion, or mercy. His condition in modern medical terms is that of pathological narcissism. In verse after verse in the Quran, it is always towards Muhammad that they point. Allah is only used as the divine threatening whip to put his followers in line. The verses of the Quran instruct Muhammad's followers that they should obey him blindly and unquestioningly, that they should follow whatever example he may set, his sunnah, that they should believe that he is the messenger of Allah, that they should know that he, Muhammad, is superior to any and all other Arabs, if not humanity, that he, Muhammad, has intercessory powers with Allah, that revelations come to him whenever and wherever he needs them, that Allah hates the enemies of Muhammad in even greater measure than Muhammad, that everything Muhammad covets, wants, needs, or lusts for is made halal to him by the will of Allah through the usual convenient and made-to-order revelations, that all those who do not believe in him or insult him will end up dead, usually murdered, and that their bodies will suffer the eternal and numerous tortures of Allah's hell, that he is the beloved of Allah, that the enemies of Muhammad are automatically the enemies of Allah. There is no difference in the association, that even the gossip of his wives is monitored by Allah, that he is in touch with the angel Gabriel a lot of the time, especially when a necessary revelation is required, that those who die fighting at the behest of Muhammad will go to a paradise full of sensual and carnal pleasures, with males or females infinitely more rewarding than anything on earthly life. When the verses of the Quran are studied carefully, anyone who knows the different characteristics of pathological narcissism will be able to, without any difficulty whatsoever, to fit one or more of them perfectly with verses from the Quran. It is inconceivable that any omniscient, compassionate, and merciful God would have revealed all the anomalies, inconsistencies, incongruities, contradictions, misinformation, grammatical errors, disinformation, absurdities, and mendacities that fill the verses of the Quran. All these facts can be fully and easily explained the moment the listener comes to the only logical conclusion possible, that every letter, every word, every verse ayah, and every chapter surah in the Quran are the product of Muhammad's own imagination, his alter ego, but cleverly projected into the unsuspecting mouth of Allah, the supreme rock god of pagan Mecca, embedded in the corner wall of the Kaaba called the Black Stone. Hence, Allah, the rock god of pagan Arabia and the Quran, is not and cannot be the god of Israel, of Christianity, of Zoroaster, or anybody else. Neither could a rock reveal anything to anyone. The conundrum is now immediately and very logically resolved. The Quran is not divine. Muhammad, Allah, Gabriel, and Satan are all one and the same, Muhammad himself.